the massive blast that leveled large portions of Beirut. The Lebanese capital lies in ruins after a suspicious fire spread to a warehouse used to store highly explosive materials.
An earth-shaking blast tore through Beirut, killing dozens and injuring thousands, officials said. The blast, caught on video by those nearby, occurred at the site of a burning fire near the port in the Lebanese capital, throwing people miles away onto their backs, ripping balconies off buildings and sending glass flying, witnesses said.
We heard the first explosion and went to see what happened. I didn't have time. I didn't realize there would be a second explosion. The glass exploded in front of me.
We were at home. We heard what sounded like fireworks. We thought it was a container in the port that was on fire and they weren't able to put it out. A few seconds later, we were flying through the air.
The explosion, described by many as intense as an earthquake, could even be heard and felt as far away as Cyprus. While no group has claimed responsibility for the blast and Israel has denied involvement, Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab swiftly demanded accountability for what he called a catastrophe.
Those responsible will pay the price for what happened. This is a promise to the martyrs and to the wounded. This is a national commitment. The facts will be revealed about this dangerous warehouse that has been there since 2014.
At least 78 people are dead, 4,000 are injured, and more than 300,000 are displaced by the blast. Reports show Lebanese officials knew of the dangers posed by the ammonium nitrate stored at the port for years, but did nothing to reduce the risk. Meantime, President Trump is pledging American assistance as the capital city begins the long rebuilding process. Joining me now from our bureau in Washington, D.C., decorated Army combat veteran, writer for Newsmax, and CEO of international security firm Packham Solutions, Cory Mills. Cory, first of all, thank you for your service, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Cory, how do you think this event will impact Lebanon, especially considering the economic turmoil happening there prior to the explosion?
Well, first off, this devastation is really untimely. Lebanon is facing socioeconomic stagnation. They're facing a plague of issues that's arisen since the 1975 war, where there was a share of power between Hezbollah and the actual government. They're seeing famine within the country, keeping in mind that they only produce about 10% of the nation's needed grain, which is why that port was so vital to their life source. I mean, 80% of their medications and the food source that they get was coming in and out of that port. And COVID-19 has had a drastic impact on that nation because with Hezbollah, they actually refused to close the airports, enabling Iran and China to fly in for a lot longer than they should have.
Now, the Prime Minister has stated that he's going to find those responsible for the explosion. What does that suggest to you? Does that suggest there's some sort of foul play here?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a lot that's going to come out of this investigation. I don't like to be a conspiracist, but there's been a litany of issues that's arisen recently. One, you had Hezbollah operatives who was trying to sneak into Israel on just last week. And on Monday night, you had the IDF who had to make numerous strikes as a result of explosives that were being planted there on the actual Israeli border. Let's also take this back for a moment. Let's not forget that ammonium nitrate was the very same thing that was utilized by Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. So this was seized 6 years ago. And the fact that, yes, you could have decay and, yes, you could have had some type of a sympathetic detonation, but it's just very timely with when this has come about with regards to the tribunals.
Yeah, and there's been recent events involving Hezbollah operatives on the border with Israel, with the IDF responding swiftly. Do you think that this is going to further tensions in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's certainly got a lot of people's senses heightened. You have the incidents that are going on in Syria. You've got the General Secretary for Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who is continuing to make anti-Semitic and anti-Western statements. He's drawn himself more and more into Iran. I mean, the former Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in the counterterrorism strike there in Iraq, his daughter actually just married Hassan Nasrallah's son, therefore drawing things even closer. And again, Hezbollah is probably one of the best proxy militias that's come about from the Quds Force and from the IRGC in Iran.
Yeah, and then it's been stated that in the coming days, a tribunal was preparing a verdict on the 2005 assassination of the former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. Do you find the timing of this incident alarming? And of course, we don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here, but do you think it's alarming?
It's extremely alarming, and you're spot on. I mean, again, we're sitting here looking at, in a matter of days, the tribunal in Lebanon going forward and actually rendering a verdict on the assassination of the former prime minister, which was conducted and carried out by the Hezbollah Iranian regime. And here, within the matter of days, the exact port, which is the life source for Lebanon and very near to the prime minister's past residence, was hit and impacted. So again, in police work, they call that a clue, but it's certainly interesting timing.
Well, Cory, thank you for your insight. We really appreciate it. Coming up next, the